Aloha, it's Dave Lawrence. How are you? I hope you're doing great. A big mahalo for tuning in today. We are so fortunate. We've got a funk legend on the line, and I do mean legend, ahead of his big gig with the Runnin' Partners on the Valley Isle. It's Funk, the End of the World Camp K&I, December 21st and 22nd, 2 days of funk. It's based around one day that has been humorously used to gather talented musicians from across the funk sphere in a celebration befitting the end of the world, surely. Your next big Mayan get-together or just your calendar. Our next guest is included there. Since the 60s, part of the Meters, now the Funky Meters. He's earned a reputation, one of the funkiest bass players alive. And while the Meters don't have the widespread name recognition that James Brown or George Clinton or the Ohio Players have, he's on that level for where he's played in funk history and why his resume has names like Paul McCartney, Patti LaBelle, Robert Palmer, Robbie Robertson, and others associated with it. We're honored he break away from cooking up the filthy, nasty funk for just a moment to talk to us. What a humbling thing. Bringing the funk train to a complete standstill on our behalf. It's something. All to spread the love, and it's a pleasure to welcome, like I said, from the Crescent City Meters, Funky Meters, Runnin' Partners, George Porter Jr. I'm humbled. I'm honored. I can't even believe I'm talking to you. Aloha and mahalo, my brother.
My brother. Yeah, you're right.
How you doing and how you feeling? I'm giving you a hug and a high five and lots of love.
Yeah, you're right. It's right back at you. I'm doing really wonderful. It's a little. We have a little bad weather this morning, a little lightning and thundering, but it's cool. In fact, I was kind of looking forward to some rain.
Sometimes some rain is not a bad thing. And talking story with us, we're blessed. You're coming to this unusual gig. And before we hear about the gig, what kind of background and history do you have with Hawaii, George? When have you been here, and what have you done?
Well, I've been to that festival once before, but I don't believe it was called with his name. But I believe I've worked at Sam's site before a few years ago with Porter Baptiste Stokes, and I'm not sure how to explain it. I think I've just been lucky and as well as fortunate to be able to actually still be out here playing and representing some music that's been around for over 30 years, about 37 years. Some of those songs we recorded back in 1967. And a lot of the songs that's on my current CD, Can't Beat the Funk, was recorded in 68, 69, I believe, and maybe a couple in 2000. I mean, not 2000, but 1970. But I've been lucky and fortunate, man, and been happy, to be able to find the love and the respect of a bunch of young players that don't have a problem following this old man.
Oh, they more than that. They idolize you. When you think about that, the Can't Beat the Funk and this upcoming show in particular, what can folks expect? How is this thing going to translate into a set?
Well, I've been debating the set list for the last 2 days, and I haven't quite figured it all out yet. But I got a feeling that it's gonna have a I'm gonna pull out of some of the earlier Runnin' Partners music that hasn't been played in a while, as well as probably I think we have a 2-hour performance, so I'm probably gonna pull off 20 songs or more. Also, it depends on how much jamming we get into. If we start jamming, we may not play 20 songs.
You won't have time for that. There are a couple things about you that make you really unique on the front. You're not only a funk legend, you're a New Orleans funk guy, but you also, it's New Orleans, it's funk, it's history, but it's very contemporary. For uninitiated people who are curious and they hear the word funk and they want to know what it means, try to explain what funk is and how it's been a part of your life. That's a real hard question to answer because I've never I always had my story about where funk came from was some guy woke up one morning after a long night and he had a joint in his hand and the beer laying on the floor on the side and on the couch, and he said he heard some music and the first thing came out of his mind, oh man, that is funky,
and because all before then, it was R&B music. It was what we played was R&B. And, it wasn't called, the labels, I've always had a problem with the labels, that they stuck on our music,
Sure.
because it was just a thing to separate black musicians from white musicians back in the days. And, the labels still stick around, and they still have that kind of, for me, not the greatest taste in the world in my mouth, but I think the music speaks for itself. I mean, if how it relates to a single individual, because the truth of the matter is, funk music, as what we call funk music, has not crossed over into mainstream. So funk musicians don't sell as many records as the pop artists do. Because why? Because the pop radio, or the top 40 radio stations across the world don't play our music, because why? Because of that label, you know what I mean?
Interesting. I've never ever thought of it. See, and I come from, I guess, the musical fan side, so I always look at it like it's a, after having gotten to interview James Brown and George Clinton in particular, I always have looked at like the roots, the history, the lineage of funk. I look up to it. I love it. I worship it. It's such a big part of my life. So then I think of you, and I think of how long you guys did it, and you were sort of the musicians band. It was like musicians really, really loved what you did, and yet otherwise, like you kind of described, it was an underground thing. And I guess I was trying to figure out where you and your fellow original guys in the Meters, how you carved out that niche and wanted to do the pioneering stuff you were doing then.
Well, I don't think that the band made a serious effort to be, to be that. I think we were recording and finding, and we were researching stuff that we felt individually, and trying to live up to a New Orleans feel, a street feel, and just doing, we never discovered what this was all about until it was way too late. The band had broke up, and then then we started analyzing. Then I can only speak for myself.
Right.
I can't. When I said we, I should not say it. I should have said I.
Right.
Because everybody in the Meters, all had a different view on where and what we were doing, and I think that probably had a big thing. Had a big reason that the band kind of went separate ways. Because it was at some point in our career we realized that we weren't really reaching for the same thing musically.
Mm.
And so that created that divide.
Do you find a different sort of outlet with the partners? It's like is it more because you don't have to deal with people who don't share your vision, or is it a different kind of sound that defines it?
Well, with the running partners, I think it has more to do with at this point is my vision, and the players that play with me. Although they are absolutely given the freedom to be creative, still pretty much live within the parameter of my musical concept, which I believe has helped me, be a better leader for the most part. But at the same time, not constricting or restricting any of my players to just being a sideman.
I get it.
I mean, they have creative input. I don't write their solos; they take their own solos. I mean, there are bands out there in the world where the artist writes the solos. You know what I'm saying?
Now I know what you mean, and there's also a very at this point in your life, you would rather be in charge of that direction. You've got a vision that's come from years and years of fine-tuning it, if you will, and it might be a little bit easier to work in that realm than have to buck heads with other folks and sort of share a vision.
Well, I believe, I still believe that there's a musical camaraderie that if the original four members was to ever make an attempt to try and do that, I believe that if it had to be, it will be. I believe that. I never, like I say, I never use the word never.
I know. That's a nice feeling that it's so open, huh?
Yeah.
That it could come back.
As long as everybody's alive and everybody still play, and wants to play, then there's a chance that something could happen again.
That's one of the great legacies when you have people that are alive. That's what's frustrating when other bands that do have everybody alive won't work it out or throw some beef up into the mix. When you think about New Orleans, you were the first show I ever saw when I went to Jazz Fest down there years ago. It was 1994. You went on at like 2 in the morning. And I was hoping you could kind of explain the city's routine and how New Orleans historically operated at some very late hours to catch the best jams.
Well, I think it has a lot to do with the fact that they get up very late in the day.
Start late, work late.
They start late, so they might as well end late,
Right.
I think that probably has something to do with it.
Do you like to get up later in the day? When do you prefer to get up?
Who, me?
Yeah.
Well, after I've been sober now almost 23 years.
That'll change it.
And since my sobriety, I actually, I do still go to bed, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. But, I tend to only sleep about 5 hours, and I'm out to bed, I'm up, So I'm usually up around 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, every day.
You looked so alert. It was as if it was noon when you were getting on stage there at 2 a.m.
Well, you see, I probably had a chance to take a nap,
Oh, is that part of the secret?
Yeah, well, it was 1994. Yeah, I think I started taking naps around that time of year.
Do you have any favorite, when thinking about New Orleans, special place? People, a lot of people just kind of love it for different reasons. When it comes to New Orleans food, regional favorites, have there been any kind of things that really are part of your palate that you would share with us, things you really dig eating?
Ooh, the food thing, I mean, we could take a month talking about that.
Is there anything particular, though, a special item down there that means a lot to you on the plate, maybe has a connection to your family growing up, historical significance in your life?
I don't think there's, I tell the truth about it. There isn't anything that I like any better than anything else. I mean, anything my mom cooks, it works for me. Anything my wife cooks, is great. My daughter has taken over the gumbo department in our family, and absolutely, my mom passed it on to her, and man, that she has created my mom's gumbo. She has recreated my mom's gumbo to masterpiece.
So there is an item, your mom's gumbo.
My mom's gumbo. That's probably it.
I like that. I dig that. What was that whole Queen Mary, Venus and Mars event about? If you could kind of take us to it. It's part of your legacy that's just one of those things that when you put that thing on, it's hard to not drive your neighbors nuts because you just want to crank it so loud. If you can talk a little bit about how you got connected to Paul McCartney and that whole thing. Well,
the history has to be corrected. I mean, because I'm not sure how it got wrote wrong. But the McCartney, my relationship with McCartney, does not go to the point where I was needed as a musician for to work with Paul. But Paul was in New Orleans doing an album, the Venus and Mars project, I believe it was the name of it, and he recorded at C. Saint Studios. And the meters were out on the road, and we came home, and a friend of mine, Steve Egerton, who was driving the McCartneys around, told we know that, but Paul had been asking where was I, because he wanted to connect, with me when he was in New Orleans, and I was out of town when Steve told Linda that I was here. She told Steve to go get me, bringing me to the studio. So Steve did. He grabbed me and brought me down to the studio, and pretty much it was a kind of thing that when I first got there, Linda recognized me immediately. I didn't know who she was because Steve wouldn't tell me what he was doing. He was just bringing me down to the studio.
Wow.
And so when I walked in, she ran up. So Steve was on the other side of her when she grabbed me and hugged me. And so I'm looking at Steve, and well, who the hell is this? And he kind of lifted out to me that does Linda McCartney. I say, oh, hey, Linda, what's up? And stuff. So she was playing with this Xerox machine when I got there, and she had me stick my hands on the Xerox machine, and then she Xeroxed my hands, and then went back to the studio. And Paul and I was in the control room listening to a playback, and she came in with this picture of my hands, and she showed it to him and said, "Guess whose hands these are?" And so he's kind of looking at her and said, "Come on, like whose hands are these?" She said, "Okay, who's your favorite bass player?" And he said, "George Porter Jr." And that was, boom.
Wow.
I said, whoa, wow.
And you could watch this happen.
So it was like, I said, cool. But anyway, the session thing came out of, at the end of when he had finished his record, they recorded, because it was Mardi Gras time in New Orleans at the time when they did that album. They recorded a Mardi Gras song. The song is kind of, and I still don't know it today if that actually was ever an actual record. Because I believe that the radio station in New Orleans played it from a cassette.
Oh.
That was made, in the studio. They made it, and then they played it, they got it on, WWOZ in New Orleans.
I know that station.
As a cassette.
So not an official release.
So I don't even know if the actual record or recording was ever, made public or made to the world. I really don't think it was.
But then you guys did that mind-boggling event on the Queen Mary, where that set.
Oh yeah, the party. Yeah, that was the party that, after the session. It was, I believe, I want to say this was probably the week after Mardi Gras. They threw a party. I want to say probably Allen people threw a party for the McCartneys, like a rap party on the riverboat in New Orleans, and we all partied, and there's tons of pictures from that. There's one really nice picture of Paul and Linda singing. We played "Come Together" because the Meters had recorded that track. And we played "Come Together," and I had a top hat on, and Paul and Linda was on both sides of me. We were singing "Come Together," the song, So that was the thing. But the thing about the recording was that they did this Mardi Gras song, and Earl King, Leo Nosentel, I want to say, was there. Curly Moe, Benny Spellman, a whole bunch of New Orleans artists that was in the back room that was just hanging around the studio, that always hung around the studio, all ended up in the studio with Paul, playing cowbells and tambourines, making this parade sound. It sounded like a parade was coming at the end of the track. It sounded like a parade was coming by,
I get it. They were creating the ambient effect of it.
Yes. And that was the gist of this recording that says that everybody in the world has been told that George Porter, has recorded with McCartney. He didn't need a bass player. He was a bass player.
Right. No, that's a great thing for you to clarify. But I think, what? It's just the stories, George, that make it so sick. I think it's less about the actual recording and the fact that you were. I love the thing that she walked up to him with the photocopy of your hand. It's like it's your who's your favorite bassist? I mean, what a great. Where were you? You were standing there watching that happen, huh?
Yeah. I was like right outside the door. The door was. I could hear her ask the question. I can hear him answer the question because they had stopped rolling. She kind of stopped the playback, to get him to do this.
It's got to make you feel good to remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great feeling that that he always McCartney has always been a big fan of New Orleans music. I knew that from when we first met him, years earlier, the Meters with a New Orleans kind of band, what it was like a road show. I want to say it was Dr. John, Alan Toussaint, Dr. John, Now I'm thinking about it. Alan may not have been there, but it was definitely Dr. John, the Meters, Professor Longhair, and I was kind of thinking it should have been. Sound like it to me. It should have been one more artist there. It may have been either Earl King or Alan. I can't remember. We did a show in London, and I think it was like the first time that whole configuration went to Europe, and that's when actually the funny thing I remember, because Ron Woods was still a member of Faces.
Okay, that dates it. That gets you an idea when it was.
Yeah. So I wanted, I was sitting about thinking about that the other day, and I wanted to go look up on the internet and look up when was the years that Ron Woods had actually played in Faces.
I think it ended about 73, 70. I'm trying to think when it would have been, 75, something around there.
Yeah, because I want to think that it had to be, early enough for us to have already recorded. No, maybe we hadn't done the Right Place, Wrong Time album yet, because we had been doing these shows with Dr. John in New Orleans, the Mardi Gras Mambo kind of shows. It was like the Jefferson, out in St. Bernard Parish, like below south of New Orleans, for a few years, starting in the late '60s. And that probably might have been one of those things that might have led up to the Dr. John session.
When you talk about that, I've always been curious. One of the things, and no one ever really has told me they've done it, but like in New Orleans, all that country in Louisiana that surrounds it, have you ever been out deep in Cajun country in some place where like nobody even speaks English?
Have I done that?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I had my first band after I left the original Meters was maybe 6 months, 8 months after Art left the band. But my first band after that, which came up in 1980, was with a Lafayette guitar player named Bruce McDonald, and that was actually it was like 1979 when I met Bruce and started working with him and writing songs. It ended up being the very first Joyride. It was a record recorded under the name of Joyride. And
I'll have to dig that up.
Yeah, you can. I think it's out there on a record label named God. What's the name of that record label? It's out in New York. It's kind of an underground kind of thing. And Turf City or Tough City, Turf City maybe, I believe.
And you're playing your super heavy, nasty funk on there. And
well, it's funk with a Cajun feeling.
Oh, nice.
It was kind of crazy,
I like that.
The song, my theme song with Running Point is this Happy Song, and it came from that recording session because Bruce McDonald wrote that song. And but I when we first started getting together, I started going to Lafayette a lot, just hanging out, because we would play more in Lafayette than we would play in New Orleans. So that was my I ventured out, and actually I'm talking to you from my home in Darrow, Louisiana, which is like I think it's like 57 miles from the city of New Orleans, going towards Baton Rouge.
I get it. So you're out there. You're saying you're in Gator country.
Yeah. Well, every now and then I see a gator on the highway. Walking too.
Yeah, well, better than not walking, my brother. As we go to wrap it up here with you, you're not going to be, by the way, when you come to do the Maui thing, you're not coming through Honolulu by any chance, are you? Going right to Maui?
No, it's actually we're coming in for a one-off. They were trying to do some shows. Apparently, I heard there was a festival. I think it's a little festival going on this weekend, and they were trying to hook me up with Bill Kurtzman and Steve
Kimmock,
and but that didn't pan out, because I was supposed to be in there for like 2 weekends. Okay. I was actually going to leave New Orleans on the 12th, and I think I was going to play the 15th or something like that.
So not going to go through Honolulu
with Bill and Kimmock, and then go to Maui afterwards.
Wonder where they're playing. I don't think they're playing here in town. I'll look it up and see. Maybe they are. And
I think that whole thing went away. The festival might be going on, but I think the show went away because Bill kind of backed away from it.
Yeah, because I don't think he's coming, or I would have known he was he was going to be there. So that was one of my final questions. So it's just going right to Maui for this thing. And finally, as a sort of final note, so many people look up to you, and really, I mean, everybody. It could be Warren Haynes and Derek Trucks from the Allman Brothers. I mean, the laundry list of cats who hold you up at super high esteem is ridiculous. If I asked you on the other side of that to name some of the most influential cats for you who may not be necessarily the obvious ones, but people who you've looked up really highly to, maybe have picked up a thing or two, could be when you were a little guy, could be now, people you really, really admire. They can even be some of your fans, but they don't have to be. Who can you name a few of them that come to mind?
Well, the people who I looked up to musically, unfortunately are no longer here. That would be Earl King. Earl King probably like being the top of my list of players. Curtis Mayfield, absolutely. Curtis Mayfield, just his approach to the way he sang words, just always I've loved his approach. I've sang his songs, all the way back to the Impression days. Those two are probably my largest musical influences. And absolutely members of, all the members of the Meters, Leo Nosentelli, Joe Modeles, Art Neville, Art Neville probably being like my, kind of like my music mentor, Art was, I've always loved Art Neville, and still do. And, he was just like, he was more than just a friend, musically, but more as, not as musical, but more as, that male figure that kind of kept you from, teaching you what not to do.
Right, which is
not necessarily telling you what to do, but trying to just showing you what not to do.
Things to avoid along the way.
I'm sorry?
Things to avoid along the way.
Yeah, things to avoid. Now he didn't give us all of the pitfalls because we absolutely ran into a lot of ditches.
But he tried.
But that's all a part of growing up.
Oh, totally.
If you don't have no ditches, then you're never going to really know. If success ever really hits you, you're not going to be able to know what to do with success unless you knew how to fail first.
It's advice spoken by a true funk warrior. Brother George, you think down the road when you're back through, or just like maybe like, at some point we'll be able to maybe call you again, check in with you again, see what you're up to in like a year or something? Is that okay?
Well, excellent.
Do you mind if we we'll keep in touch? Just because I really dig talking to you, brother. Hey,
absolutely. Please do. I'm not sure if you have my email address, but but that's easy to get. If you went to my website, georgeporterjr.com, you can email me from there.
Excellent.
And I can reply to you and give you my personal email address.
Perfect. I will. I hope you had fun today. Was this an okay interview?
Excellent. And I'd just like to mention, the four musicians that I'm bringing over with me.
Please.
Guitar player and also running partner's Warrior. He's the oldest running partner in the band. Oldest member, I should say. Brent Anderson is on guitar and vocals, and the second oldest is Mike Limler, is the keyboardist, and my two young players, Terrence Houston is the drummer, and my baby in the band is Chris Rowell. He's the youngest one. He's the saxophonist and vocalist. So, that's my running partners, and then bringing a wife along with us to keep me in check.
Well, it's the end of the world. You got to go down in check. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're right.
Hey, I give you a hug. I'll give you a high five. I'll reach out to you online and stay in touch, Brother George. I hope you enjoyed this today. It meant a whole lot to me you would take the time to speak with me. I've been a big fan for a long time. I love what you do, man. You make things sound just so warm on that bass. It's like, it's unbelievable. I see why everybody loves you. I'm bowing to the phone, so thank you.
Yeah, you're right. My pleasure, Dave. Thank you.
And we'll stay in touch. Be safe, brother.
Say hello when I'm over there.
Well, you're in Maui. I'm in Honolulu. So
okay.
Believe me, if I had the ducats, my man, I'd be over there. We'd be kicking back large, recording a thing.
Yeah,
That's what
we can get Bill Christman to bring you over in a boat.
Well, tell him. So you got to pick up Brother Dave. I'll see you, man. Stay in touch.
All right, Captain. Take care.
You too. Aloha.
Bye-bye.
Bye.